The Short Game is listener-supported on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show and join us on our Discord, head to theshortgame.net or patreon.com/theshortgame.
Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I'm Raygan Kelly, and I'm joined this week by my full complement of cool co-hosts.
Nate Heininger.
Laura Nash.
And the narrator, Shane Kelly.
And this week we are talking about Slay the Princess. I don't know exactly how to classify this game from the developer Black Tabby Games.
Branching role player visual novel thing. Yeah. Horror game.
Super high budget IF comp game.
I saw something classify this as a horror tragic comedy, which I think is a good approach. There's a lot to talk about in terms of the content of this game. Its story, its character, its setup, etc. But maybe it would make sense for us to start just a little bit talking about like the actual structure of this thing, which isn't really clear before you dive into it. It's a bit of a visual novel, but it's not the kind of visual novel I'm used to mostly not playing, but only occasionally.
It's a visual novel in the way Doki Doki Literature Club is a dating sim.
Yeah.
It's structurally, it's very different from any of that sort of game that you've ever played, mainly because it is among the most massively branching narrative games that I've ever played. The choice structure here is many leaves and very, very few branches. It's a huge fork.
Yeah. What I think is really cool about this is that like it is a choice-based interactive fiction type game. This is a game where we're playing through a story and making, usually you have 3 to 5 choices on screen in between different story beats. But it really goes like shallow and wide rather than like shallow is the wrong word, but I'm trying to get across that like you don't have a ton of story content between beginning and end, but what you have is a huge number of choices that branch so wide that you have an enormous number of potential outcomes for what is a relatively short story. We'll talk about the story that it sets up, but it's literally like a 3-beat story, but you're playing through it many times in many, many different ways, which is, I think, a really cool approach. It's not the only game I've seen like this. When I first heard this described to me, I was like excited for this to be a little bit like a Stanley Parable kind of thing, right? Like Stanley Parable has a little bit of the same kind of thing where it's like, it's not a long story, but it has enormous numbers of potential branches. This doesn't quite land there, but it's not that far off. And it's a very distinct approach.
Yeah, I thought of Stanley Parable a lot while playing this game, and not just because of a delightful British narrator, but also because of the choices and the sort of flow state of the game.
And
that's exactly why I was
cynicism. I think one of the articles I keep coming back to in interactive fiction for my day job as a designer is there's an article called Standard Patterns in Choice-Based Games by Sam Ashwell from 2015, and in which he names all of these different shapes of games. And this one's like, he calls one Time Cave, which you enter and everything branches and branches and branches and branches. He's like, no one does Time Cave anymore because it's too laborious. And I'm like, well, this one did. It's a time cave with a loop. Like it's
is that named after the Choose Your Own Adventure book, The Cave of Time?
It is named after Choose Your Own Adventure, the Time Cave. The idea that like even with multiple playthroughs, you're gonna miss some content, like really short playthroughs. The difference is this one is a time cave that loops.
I can't even imagine trying to track the amount of choices available in this game. A lot of games like this, you're like, oh, I made this choice. I might go back and like play this again and make a different choice, and I'll remember what I did, and I'll try to like do everything like almost within the first like half hour of playing this game. I was like, well, that's out. There's no way I'll ever be able to track exactly what I did, when and who, so I can go and try to do the opposite. It's not that there's so many small choices, but it's also compact. I don't know. It's wild how dense this game is.
I have seen games with this much branching before, but they were not short games, and this one still is. So I think that's what's remarkable is the depth of this game, and also its commitment to seeing a lot of the branching.
Yeah.
Which we're all talking around it. I will say right off the bat, like, this is a narrative game with lots of secrets. Yes, that is the mental state that this game has put me in. There are content warnings and there's also spoilers, so be warned.
One thing I think is really interesting about this structure that we can also say here is that it is massively branching, and looping, but even within a single branch, the story itself kind of loops back. Mm-hmm. So you, even within a single traversal of the choice tree that is the structure of this game, there are little loops that you're already going through. There's kind of a 3-chapter, 3-act structure to each of those loops. And so as you progress through all of these, the number of possible outcomes is something like 25 or 26 different possible endings to that overall structure. And you're likely going to see about 4 of them. So everyone is going to have a very different experience with this game. And the other thing I'm very excited to talk about this game is, we've talked about this narrator that sounds a lot like the sort of thing you've seen from the Stanley Parable. The reason I really wanted to play this game, and I've kind of petitioned the co-hosts to come along with me on it, is because that narrator is Jonathan Sims of the Magnus Archives. I don't know how many of you guys have listened to that.
Not exhaustively, but you recommended it, and I've heard a few. It's pretty good.
Well, I kind of want to talk about that for just a little bit for a second. I got into the Magnus Archives very late in its run. The Magnus Archives is a famous, award-winning horror fiction podcast that ran for like 5 seasons, right up until the time that I was listening to it, which is when I would go for long nighttime walks during the pandemic when I had nothing to do in the spooky, scary dark. I'm going to pitch the audience on it a little bit because I personally really enjoyed it. And I think this is a good time to listen to it because it's about to have a sequel series. The whole Magnus Archives concluded in 2001. And they're about to start releasing the Magnus Protocol, which is kind of a sequel series. So the Magnus Archives is a episodic horror fiction podcast, kind of akin to something like The Twilight Zone. And it's focused on the archives of the Magnus Institute, which is a kind of an organization that researches the kind of mysterious and strange. And the head archivist is kind of the main narrator is Jonathan Sims, who is like the kind of named the character after himself, did a great deal of the writing for the Magnus Archives. And the thing that I really, really like about the podcast is it starts off as that sort of episodic horror and kind of eases you into it with a little bit of characterization. And I really love it when stories do this. Slowly grows the kind of backstory to the characters and the other side characters that are also part of the Magnus Institute until that really becomes the main narrative. And there are really clever, really inventive horror stories all throughout that long run. So I totally highly recommend it. I'm very excited for the Magnus Protocol. But a huge part of the appeal is the creepy, spooky voice of Jonathan Sims.
He does have a good voice.
He has said he kind of regrets naming the character after himself because by the end of the story, that character is not very much like him as a real person. But one way it is very much like him is his spooky, scary voice. And here he is the narrator. So you start off I don't have it right in front of me, but the initial scene, the first moment of the game is you're on a pathway in the woods, and the narrator is kind of telling you that at the end of this pathway there's a cabin, and inside of that cabin there is a princess, and you must slay her or it will be the end of the world.
You gotta slay the princess.
You gotta slay. Well, actually, you don't gotta slay her, because that's
the narrator.
The narrator.
He says you gotta slay her, but you do have some choices there, and I think this is one of the first moments where it really starts calling out the choices. I really like that it calls out these specific choices. Things that are choices and things that aren't are very clearly labeled. If it's not an actual choice, it's always labeled explore. And it took me a little while to realize that. Things that advance the story or are a choice are not labeled that way. So I don't know. It's very hard for me to talk about this without spoiling anything. Where do we want to go in terms of our pre-spoiler break?
Well, I think first I wanted to just talk a little bit about it, sort of broad strokes.
Sure.
I love the setup because it's this cool inversion of the trope of like saving the princess. You know, the idea of like slaying a princess. Like, here's the knife, go down in the basement, slay this prisoner who is a, you know, beautiful woman with unnaturally large anime style eyes, who just looks sad, who's chained to a wall, wearing a party dress. Like, go kill her, boy.
Go kill her. And you don't even get to know why. It's only because some of those initial explore options are really probing, as anyone would hopefully do when you've been tasked with going to slay a princess, because you've seemingly awoken in this situation to slay this princess. You've been told you're the only one who can do it. You're the chosen one. You need to slay the princess. And even questions like, why? What if I don't want to do it? Couldn't you have found someone else to do it? Like, there's a lot of what I appreciate was like very logical questions as your initial choices.
And you can even enter into some exasperated philosophical debates. One, probably maybe my third or fourth choice in the Explorer, very, very early in the game, not a spoiler. The narrator says, causality doesn't matter here because the end result is the same no matter what led us up to this point. If the princess leaves the cabin, the world will end. There is no changing that. And that's the starkness of this game at the beginning.
Yeah. Stark, I mean, there's also the sort of philosophical are great points for Johnny Sins.
Yes. And the choices here go to lots of different places, but that initial choice is also just one of these great, like, you know, like trolley problem type of deals, right? Where it's the moral and ethical quandary of like, you've been told that if you don't kill this one human being, then all other human beings will die. And, you know, trying to puzzle out the ethics of that, even just in the very first moment of the game, is part of the fun and part of the pitch here. It's like, you know, okay, I know that this is a game I'm going into to like make difficult moral choices. And it being a horror game, later on, you're going to have more complicated and more difficult moral choices, complicated by just some really freaky shit. So, like, I like the setup of this a lot. It immediately drew me in. Shane talked a lot about the great, narration from the narrator. The other main voice in the game is Nicole Goodnight, who is also a horror podcast narrator from a podcast called the No Sleep Podcast, which I have not listened to. I have listened to the Magnus Archives, but she's also extremely well cast here because, as we'll get into, the princess is not exactly just one thing. The princess has a lot of different sides to her and a lot of kind of different voices. And
maybe should be killed. I don't know.
Well, you know, very possibly.
In fact, both of the narrators here are pulling a lot of weight in terms of different voiced characters. Jonathan Sims is not just the narrator. He is an entire chorus of voices in your head that have a lot of different tones to them. And the same is true for the princess. So they're both putting in a lot of work on different characterizations.
It's pretty incredible. The premise also made me think a little bit of the film Cabin in the Woods, not just because there's a cabin in the woods in this one. It also has some big overlap there, and I'm a broken record at this point, but I have to call out Disco Elysium. It reminded me of that as well, with the multiple different personalities and the multiple different voice actors, or one voice actor handling multiple different personalities. Incredible. And this game does it so well. The voice acting, like, normally I don't like a lot of visual novels and things like that. They'll spend a lot of money on doing full voice acting, and even when the performance is good, a lot of times I end up feeling like like this was not the best use of your resources. Like I'm clicking forward because I can read faster than they can talk, and I just want to get to the next thing. That's just me. This game was quite the opposite. I enjoyed the voice acting so much that I would just sit and listen to it because it really added a lot of depth.
And I enjoyed controlling the pace of this game because at times, given the, I don't think it's a spoiler to say there's going to be some repetitive dialogue, intentionally so. And I could read a little faster than the voiceover and know if I wanted to hear all of that being spoken, and I could make that choice intentionally. This is one of the smoothest systems for just moving forward. It wasn't like the voice actor paused and went, I've had some problems with things where they did not intend. Like, you could tell the game was fighting me moving ahead. This one was just like, cool, moving on. And then I was able to let, for the more dramatic scenes, or the scenes that I wanted to luxuriate in, I could let them do the full power of it.
It's very
often
polished.
I let the, I think some of these are paragraphs and some of these are dramatic speeches, and you can tell the difference reading the text. And I was always really excited to be like, yes, this one I will slow down and listen to the whole paragraph. Excellent. And that felt really good. I appreciated that choice being placed on me and not on a bug or some weirdness of the UI.
That's the kind of the choice that you have really acts kind of like a personality test. You know, you have a lot of control over this experience, and that means once we get past the spoiler break, I'm going to judge all of you for what choices you made in this game. But we've talked a lot about the audio and a lot about the writing and the branching element of it. We should also, I really want to celebrate the illustration for this game by Abby Howard, who is a cartoonist who also did their prior game called Scarlet Hollow. But this game has, for as short as it is, it has something like 3,000 pencil sketch illustrations. The illustrations in here, I think the style that they chose for this, being very sketchy when it wants to be, being very beautiful or grotesque when it wants to be, really kind of fits well with the story. And it is really fun to see. There are some insane things to see in this game. There are some truly wild moments, and they're beautifully rendered.
I will say I was nervous about the art coming in because the trailers and things, this is not a style that I normally go for. It looked intentionally so kind of like the drawings the really artistic goth kid would do in the notebooks.
Yes.
Like, that's the style. And I was nervous because in the trailers and things, I didn't know how it would work in a full game. And I was worried it was going to affect like immersion and it was just going to be kind of flat. That was not a problem once I started playing it. I think there's, they do 3 colors, which is kind of nice. Like, it's not just black and white and gray. They do a little bit of like brown in the mix just to make it a little more interesting. They do a lot of really cool setting. They do the thing that, if you ever played the ROM emulator that was the dripping bloody hand.
Nesticle.
Yeah.
Yes.
They do your cursor is a little gross hand that can hold a knife or not. And I was like, that's just an extra
nesticle.
You don't know about nesticle? It was like the first like really oh god, you've just set me off. It was a emulator that the cursor when you were in the UI was a bloody dripping hand for some. An NES emulator written by a dev with a very obvious sense of 90s humor. But it was very notable because it was one of the first truly perform. It could run NES.
Yeah, Raygan is like
a 386.
Raygan is
but the point of it being the cursor being an actual hand is in this game. Anyway, it was things like that I was really nervous going in. I won't lie. I was like, I feel like this might be an unpleasant, like intentionally so. It's a horror game, but I was like, I might just kind of bounce off the art style.
Yeah.
And I didn't. The first several settings put me at ease. The princess was in the surroundings more than the trailer would suggest. Intentionally so, again. I think the trailer did what it was supposed to do. And if you're bouncing off the trailer like I did, maybe watch a couple of minutes of someone playing it and see if you're also going to be allergic. Because I thought I was going to get... I thought I was going to be allergic to the art style, honestly. And then I was like, nope, this works really well with the story. I'm happy.
I agree. And I think it works better in it's not that it's highly animated, but like it feels like it worked better to me in motion than it did in screenshots. For one thing, they've done a little bit of that sort of like boil effect that you get with like certain types of animation where they just got a little bit of dynamism to even a still image on screen has a little bit of sort of visual vibration to it to like keep it breathing. But also, they'll frequently have the princess do something, and it's not like a fully animated thing. It's not like, ultra high frame rate animation or anything, but like there'll be like, 1 or 2 frames of animation between her poses in order to kind of give it a little bit of motion. And sometimes that's great because sometimes it's like, sometimes it's not just the princess is moving from, one position to another. Sometimes she's coming at you, right?
Yeah.
And
there's also a lovely subtle kind of parallax effect that they apply as you kind of move your cursor. So, it seems at first glance like it might be kind of a like temporary art style.
Or very flat, right? But it doesn't feel that way.
It's not at all. But before we get too deep into this, I really want to know more about Nesticle's influence on the emulation scene.
Why'd they name it Nesticle? Is it just
I feel like I summoned a demon.
Is it just funny? Is it just being funny, or is there like... All right.
I'm not speaking about this anymore. Let's continue on.
I want to call it too, while we're kind of talking about the visuals. I think it's worthwhile to call it the sound as well. Obviously, we talked about this, the voice acting. That's the primary thing you're hearing, but there is some good scoring, and then just the Foley work of this game is really good. It's a very wet game often, which is not necessarily what anyone wants, but it's a horror game, and
it's something I'm always looking for.
Yeah. So lots
favorite
of plops
movie, Waterworld.
Yeah, plops and glops and squishes and just it's all over the place, and they did good with it.
So I don't think there's much more we could say without talking a little. I wouldn't say this is quite our spoiler break yet, but we're going to, if you're very spoiler averse, we are about to start talking a little bit about the story of the game and maybe some of the loops that you can go on in this, a little bit of the structure stuff too. So Shane sort of alluded to this already, but like something that I thought was really cool about this is the way that it's structured. You play through one task. I don't know what you want to call these, chapter, whatever. You're here you are, you're on the path, go down the path up to the cabin, or don't, you can turn around and leave. In the cabin, you have the choice to pick up the dagger, which is your weapon against the princess, or not. Go down into the
look at a mirror sometimes.
Very often there's a mirror there that you can try to look into before it vanishes. This game really makes you wonder about the nature of the player character, partly because you can't seem to look in a mirror, and partly because I don't know, how long did it take you guys to notice your hands?
As soon as I picked up the knife, I was like, "What the hell is wrong?
What the hell is wrong with your hands?
It's got
you have
bird
these,
hands,
dinosaur hands. They've got claws. They've got what looked to me like scales on them. Very weird hands.
Some sort of weird hand from like a 1997 Nintendo emulator or something like that.
But your first voice is Hero.
Right.
A thing that I really appreciated in this game is early on when you're hearing, again, slight spoilers, but when you're hearing the voice of who you are as a character, you hear the hero as like one of the first identities you get. And it's really great that you hear the hero voice as you are picking up a blade and seeing this weird fucked up hand.
Yeah. The game uses every avenue to tell the story, right? Whether it's the name of the character is something, their voice is something, their visuals are something. It just, everything is compelling. I was like,
of that,
the environment.
Immediately I was like, this game is incredibly well crafted.
Speaking of using every avenue, there's the trick that I always fall for when video games do it, that this game did. I think it's probably on only one path. I wonder how many of you might have seen it, where it did the thing where, I was getting through the story and there was a point where it's like, well, you can choose to do something or just like wait around for a long time, leave and come back later is basically the story beat without spoiling it. And I chose that, and the game, I was like, oh shit, it crashed. The game completely closed. And then I reopened it, and the princess was like, you were gone a long time, but let's get back to it.
Yeah, I got that one too, Shane. And I was like, damn it, like you would have think by now, Undertale, yes, okay, and every game since that wants to be like that does it, but for whatever reason, this one, it tricked me too.
That's awesome. I didn't get that.
Yeah.
So talking through a little more of the structure there. So obviously first chapter, you go down into the basement, you talk to the princess, and you have choices that include, do I just walk up and stab her? Do I have a chat with her first and then decide whether I'm going to stab her? You have different options depending on whether you did or did not bring the knife with you, whether you sat the knife on the ground before you talked to her or carry it over to her. Lots and lots of potential branches right there in that very first room, right?
Yeah, and you have some even before it, like the picking up or not of the knife, and then surprisingly important choice, which of a number of different greetings you use. Like, do you say, hey, I'm here to kill you, or do you say hi, or do you say nothing as you walk into the room?
What I love too is there's the same there's the same sentence, but one says lie and one, so there's lie, I'm here to save you, and then there's I'm here to save you, and they're the exact same thing, but obviously the implication is completely different. And I thought that was so clever.
Yeah.
So to help illustrate how many branches we're talking in a non-spoiler way, I'm looking at the Wikipedia for the Princess Wiki, and there's a section where you can go to the first chapter and see the map, and they had to separate the diagram into whether or not you pick up the knife, and then there's still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Like there are still 11 options coming out, and they had to change the map to be 2 parts because it got too unwieldy on the fandom Wikipedia. And that's for the first loop.
Yes.
So
chapter
that's the
1,
first loop, chapter 1. So if you're, just to illustrate how much we're talking about branching, all of those little micro decisions. If you pick up the knife, you end up with one of 6 endings. If you don't, you end up with one of 5 endings. And it's wild that's chapter 1.
And that's not endings. That's like potential branches, to be honest. Endings.
That is the section ending.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That is
That is the seed for the next chapter.
Right.
And there are 11 seeds for chapter 2.
Mm-hmm. So it's so enormously branching that like there are whole chunks of this game that you will never experience, but it does sort of like you that first chapter you play through that first chapter, and then you end up in one of a variety of selected chapter 2s, and then depending on your choices in that chapter 2, you end up in one of a variety of third chapters, branching pretty far. And then by the end of that, you end up looping back to the beginning again. And there's a bit of a sort of meta story that we won't get into before spoiler break, where you start putting some of that stuff in context. But one of the things that I really appreciated about this aspect of the game, the fact that it is having you, make the same set of choices and loop through the same selection of choices in some cases multiple times, is that the game tells you narratively, but also it's not lying, that it won't let you do the same thing twice.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciated that because, like, I want to try like a slight variation on something that happened in chapter 1, right? Like, I want to, like, I did this, it turned out really interesting, but I want to try that a little bit differently. But my fear is I'm going to end up wasting my time because maybe there isn't a branch there, or maybe there isn't, like, maybe I accidentally go down the same branch again and I just have wasted, 10 minutes or 15 minutes doing the same thing again. And it doesn't let you.
Not only can you not repeat choices, but anything that will lead to the same destination is also disabled.
This is Cave of Time, but you rip out the page as you read.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it. So I think it's really like it does respect your time in that way. That said, like, you won't see it all in a single set of playthroughs. The game does have a sort of fixed number of loops before you hit credits, and that is the end of your game. It does not, as far as I could tell, have a way to, like, just keep looping and keep closing out, keep ripping out pages till there's
You're no loop hero.
No, indeed. Which I kind of would have liked, actually. Like, by the time I hit the end, I was like, I still would like to go back and do some of that.
We want arcade mode. You just go forever. Just
not that I couldn't go back and do it again, but like those paths that I'd already done would be opened up again, I believe. And that, I'd kind of appreciated the fact that they were like, those doors were closing behind me. But even so, like, really appreciated that feature of the game. And it's both just a good design thing and also narratively supported.
Like, what a significant quality of life improvement to a choice-based game, right? Especially one that you loop through. Like, I mean, I think it would be a fundamentally different experience if you could accidentally kind of do exactly what you've already done over, again, or get the same. Like, that's kind of disappointing, right? In a game where it's choice-based and you kind of like end up at the same spot, even though your choices were slightly different. The fact that they force that away from you just makes it feel way more like you're in control, and it's a unique experience end to end. I think that's super smart. I wouldn't be surprised if we see more games like this try to implement something like that, because that's brilliant.
One other thing that I think might be worth talking about a little bit, that I think I can cover without spoiling too much, because in a sense it's kind of on the poster of the game, is that something that I kind of wasn't expecting, it was a little bit of a surprise, is that yes, you're looping through this, making a ton of different choices, and your choices affect what the reactions that the princess has to you. But your branching also branches out into different versions of the princess. So the princess, appears to you in her initial form as like Laura said, like a high school notebook drawing of a princess, right? Like a pretty standard, cute
edgy
princess. Yeah. The eyes are a little too big.
Dress slipping down from her shoulders.
Yeah.
This entire thing is playing kind of in the world of tropes, and she is a trope blown up.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. She doesn't have a name. She is the princess. If you press her, she will say, you can also call me Your Highness or Your Majesty, and that's all she'll give you. But like, there are different sort of personas that she takes on in different branches of the story. And you get different like achievements or whatever. Like, so there's not quite as many of those as there are endings, but there's still like different branches that you can end up on. That surprised me a little bit, because I think when I first conceptualized this game, I was thinking of it as like one really widely branching conversation tree. And it is kind of, but like, there are different realities within this game. The game has a sort of a feel of exploring multiple worlds. It has sort of an explicit story of that in a way, but like, it has this element of like, depending on your actions as you loop through this story, the princess changes too. And that's interesting. I liked it in that, like, I think it's like, it gives more variety to the potential outcomes. In one way, I was a little disappointed by that, because I I felt like it was a little bit of it wasn't quite what I was not that it was not quite what I was. I don't quite know how to put this. Maybe there was just a little bit of disappointment in like, wow, like it felt so enormously branching. But then I kind of realized, oh well, you're really just sort of branching into these different sub branches. I don't know how to put this. Did anybody feel any weirdness?
Well, it all has to be preordained. Like,
yeah,
it's all predictive, right? If you're ending in these completely elaborate designed alternate options, right?
Yeah. I think what I guess I could say about it is like, I was going into it thinking like, oh, this is going to be an interesting sort of cat and mouse of trying to figure out the motivations of the princess. And I think what slightly annoyed me about it when I realized that there were these sort of like different divergent versions of the princess is that they have different motivations. And so it's not about like figuring out like a perfect way through or like a perfect way to like, trying to figure out what the princess really wants or something like that. You can figure out what the princess really wants pretty quickly. It's just that there's different versions of her that want different things.
Well, I really appreciated that because the choices that I was making was changing the prince like that. Like, I felt it was very deterministic in that I was shaping the princess into who she needed to be to counter me in what I was doing. So I felt, even though some motivations and things were unreliable, I could trace it did not seem random. Like if I did this and we ended this way, the version of the princess and the world that arose at first may have been really jarring, but I kind of usually found, oh, this is why they gave this to me next. Like I probably was just inventing it, but trying to find a pattern where there was, but I could see my own flow through it. And so it felt more.
I think the writing is what is like, because I felt the same way, Laura. Raygan, I do think I understand what you're saying, but I think I feel a little bit more on Laura's side, because I think the writing, all it took for me was just a little bit of the princess sort of addressing the situation at hand and what led to like her current state, and she almost always, there'd be some reference to, something that had happened in the previous loop and it just, probably filling in the in between the lines, so to speak. But like, if the loop before ended in a particularly dramatic way, it felt not uncommon for the next loop to be more blown up than the one before, and that felt like a connective tissue enough for me to feel compelled to keep going forward.
There's both elements in there. So your impulse to like learn more about the princess and like figure out the situation is satisfied by the chapter 1, 2, and 3 versions of looping in this, where you meet the princess, it goes away, it goes some kind of way, and then you go back in. When you go back in for chapter 2 and chapter 3, and in some cases chapter 4, you are examining and re-interacting with the same version of the princess, kind of in a different way, right?
Yeah.
And so you do have that experience. You do then kind of get to the final moment, because what the narrator says to you from the very beginning is true. If the princess gets out of the cabin, the world is going to end, and that's going to happen a lot. So you get to that final element of the story, and then it does loop. And we're kind of holding this back for purposes of spoilers, but there is kind of a satisfying frame story outside of that loop that does kind of give you a way to look at these different paths through the game as part of an overall bigger narrative, and giving you different visions of different facets of the same character, even though one of them is like I won't get into the specifics because I don't want to spoil anything, but they're very different, right?
Yeah.
And they have
narrative
names
like the Fury, the Stranger, the Beast, the Nightmare. Very, it doesn't tell you much, but like they're different, creepy princesses.
not all of them are even all that creepy. Some of them are quite nice.
Yeah.
So
Lots
I
of wet
think
sounds.
we can't get much farther without doing a spoiler break. I want to talk about some of the specific. Does anybody have anything that we want to say before we go to spoilers? And I think we probably have time for some what's making us happy. So maybe we do that too.
Yeah, it would be nice after this game. I'll just say I played this on Steam Deck and it was good. It was functional. I love playing games on that thing. It works for me. But I think I'd probably, if I were starting over, I would play it on like a desktop or laptop or something. There was just a little bit of clunkiness. I don't know. Did anyone else play it on Steam Deck?
I did, yeah. I saw some things that the dev said that they were like trying to patch in better gamepad controls, which I think it needs. There were definitely some weird wonkiness. Things like
nothing game breaking. I learned what the little, what the problems were, and it was pretty easy to adjust. But there's just enough clunkiness that if you're listening to this and you're like, I'm going to go get this game, and you could have easy access to either, I would probably play it on laptop or play it on.
I did switch.
It's mostly because you're choosing options from a menu. That's the main interaction. And occasionally, like, it was hard to tell what was like highlighted, or I would try to highlight something and it would end up highlighting the UI elements instead of the.
Yeah, I clicked on history like 6 times before I figured out how to like not do, just a little bit enough where I felt that it would be worthwhile to bring it up on the podcast. But I'm glad that the developers are working on it too, because if it wasn't for all that, like, this would be a perfect Steam Deck or any sort of mobile type of game. Like, this seems to be doing well. I think it would work really well, like on iPad or something, or Switch. I'm hoping that they expand it.
I played on Steam Deck as well, but I ended up defaulting to using the touchscreen a lot.
I did too. That was part of my I don't want to tap or click the wrong thing again.
Yeah, you don't get the parallax effects or the cool cursor effects playing it in that way.
True. Yeah.
So I think the way to play this for listeners is going to be on your computer.
Yeah, that's probably right. Yeah, and I would definitely recommend folks check this out. It is on Steam for $17.99, and I don't think it's come to any other platforms yet. But I think it probably will. So if you're waiting on this to hit something like the Switch, I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up there, but probably not ultra near. That said, it is Mac and Windows and SteamOS compatible, so you can play this on your Mac laptop if that's what you've got on hand. I would definitely recommend folks check this out. It's probably somewhere on my Game of the Year list.
I was feeling the same way, Raygan. I'm like, I think this feels like a full-throated short game recommendation, right? Like, some of our last few like full-length games
we
that
keep
we've done,
doing mixed recs, so now I think we're all yes.
Finally, like I've felt bad because our show is all about positivity and supporting great games, and we've done a few that we've had to have sort of.
Well, here we are, two great ones in a row: Cocoon and Slay the Princess.
I wasn't on our way, but I played it and I loved it, and
it's rad.
It's great. Yeah, it's fantastic. So it's good to get back in the swing of just playing great games, and I don't generally like the horror genre just in general, but this was great.
Yeah, totally. So we will be coming back to talk a little bit more about Slay the Princess with some spoiler break content. But before we do, let's do some What's Making Us Happy this week, just to bring a smile back to our haunted visages. Laura, what's making you happy this week?
Well, I saw a lot of movies this weekend. I had Friday off for Veterans Day, and I saw 2 movies in rep and Killers of the Flower Moon. And I'm going to talk about one of the 2 movies I saw in rep. Yes, I'm talking about an old movie, but this one's 90 minutes and it's
Laura,
amazing.
do I need to get a bell like I have for Shane talking about magic cards?
I'm not that bad. This one's 90 minutes.
I'm not that bad. Shane, you stay out of this. This is the section where we ask Laura to tell us about her interests, not the other parts of the
No, Laura, please continue. Tell us about an old movie that you enjoyed.
So I have always suspected that I was going to adore the movie The Night of the Hunter. It's from 1955. I've encountered it in a lot of ways. Like, I love Guillermo del Toro, and it's one of his favorite movies. It is a movie that my director, when I did Carousel, was like, yeah, I was really influenced in the sector. I signed by Night of the Hunter. And I was like, okay, pretentious bastard. Like, I don't need to watch this movie. So people kept telling me to watch it. I suspected I'd like it. If you are, it is the movie where the love and hate knuckle tattoos came from, that they do the right thing. That whole monologue about this is the right hand, this is the left hand, the right hand is love, and the left hand is hate. That's all from Night of the Hunter. But
that's the only thing I knew about the movie.
Yeah. But the movie is about a kind of con artist preacher man. He's not just a con artist. He straight up is a preacher who marries and murders widows. Like, and he's like talking to God, and he's like, God, you got me. You're gonna get me to another widow. Cool. Like, we're doing, like, I'll raise money for the Lord, and you're gonna point me to another widow with a bunch of dollar bills and a sugar basket. And it's like driving a car down the street.
It's the perfect crime.
Yeah. So he gets arrested for stealing a car, goes to prison, and his cellmate is somebody who's just stolen $10,000 and is gonna get hung, and he won't tell anybody where the money is. So what happens? Preacher goes, gets out for good behavior, goes to the family, marries the widow. They say, oh, the kids are, of course, like, oh, the money was thrown in the river. We're all good. The guy knows, everybody but the mother knows the money is not in the river. So it becomes this chase where there's these two little kids who know where the money is, this evil man, a mother who is, completely buying it. And the whole town is like, you gotta marry this preacher. He's the nicest man. You're and they kind of slut shame her too. They're like, you were way too much into sex with that old man. Like, go marry, like, this preacher. He's gonna sort you out and make you a good woman again. And it becomes like a chase. It's beautiful. It's evocative. It's scary. It's funny. It's shot in a really, like, lovely fairy tale way, where there's a section where the kids are in a boat and they're going down the river, and you keep seeing, like, them shot through a spider web and, like, a little frog there. It's all so dreamy. I've never seen a movie that I was like, all of these are iconic images and they feel like iconic images, and I've never seen any of them before except the fists. So, and then it was 90 minutes and it was over, and it ends on Christmas. So I was like, was this a Christmas movie?
There you go. That's all you need.
So it's got a little of everything. Straight 5-star movie. I was like, oh, I don't think I've seen a movie that was so clearly going to be one of my favorite movies in a long time. Wow. So, and also so easy to recommend, like, something for everybody. Night of the Hunter is a good time. Don't watch it with your kids. Lots of kids in peril.
Well, no.
Lots of knives. But if you liked this game, this is not a horror movie, but people round it up to horror because they like it so much. It's definitely scary. So
cool.
Night of the Hunter. Ring the bell. I watched an old movie.
There you go.
I'll do mine real quick, and you can ring the bell for me too, because I bought a piece of technology.
Ding, ding, ding.
I have a my long-awaited pre-order for a Framework laptop came in, and this is a laptop that, like, so this is a laptop that I mostly bought because I like the idea of it, but I'm really quite enjoying it as an actual thing too. So if you're not familiar, Framework is a company that makes laptops. They have two models, 13 and a 16-inch. And their whole deal is modularity and repairability. So you buy it, or at least the version of it that I bought literally comes as a kit. It's got a main board, it's got a bottom case, it's got a top case, and a like a screen bezel and stuff like RAM and stuff comes in the box as like pieces. So it's all replaceable. This is actually the second revision of it. So, like, folks who bought a Framework laptop a couple of years ago are now able to buy a new main board that has a new CPU and have, like, a whole new laptop for just the cost of the board. It's very easy to work on. A lot of the pieces are held together with magnets. So if you want to take the laptop apart, you take out like 6 screws that are, like, fixed in place. They're not, like, going to drop out and get lost. And then the top case magnets off, and you've got access to the internals. It also has this kind of cool approach to ports where rather than having a fixed selection of ports, it has these modules on the side that have a button to remove them. And there's 4 of them, and each of them has a port on it, and you can reconfigure what ports your laptop has. So like I wanted 2 USB-C ports, a USB-A port, and an SD card reader, but you could also have 4 USB-C ports, or, all USB-A, or put a HDMI on there, or an Ethernet, or whatever you want. So it's this incredibly modular design. And it's also like really tinkering friendly. You can upgrade the RAM, you can upgrade the SSD, you can order it with or without an OS on it. So I've installed Linux, but also Windows, and I'm just liking it. It's like I like what it sort of stands for, but it's also just like a nice ass little laptop. It's like a 13-inch. I've got the version with the AMD processor, so it's not exactly like a gaming beefy thing, but it's definitely up to snuff with most of the types of games that we play. And it's a pretty cool little laptop.
Yeah, so I'm looking at it now. I was expecting this to be one of those things where it's like, yeah, you have to do all the work and you pay way more money. But it actually, that's about the price of a Apple.
Yeah, that's not true. It's a little more expensive than like if you were buying the same specs on a like a Dell or something. It's a little more expensive than that, but it feels nicer than any PC laptop I've ever owned.
Mm-hmm.
And
you Apple losers have, if you want to have all the ports, you have to go to the store and buy a $30 dongle. All I have to do is unscrew 8 screws and buy a module off of their website.
You can swap the modules with like one button from the bottom without taking anything apart. It's very, very easy to do. But I'm not saying this thing is for everybody. If you are like, for example, if you're like a diehard Mac user, like, I have this, and I also have a Mac laptop. Like this is like, it's not replacing that in my life. Mm-hmm. But like, if you like to tinker with your computer and you want to buy a PC laptop, this is a little more expensive than a comparable machine, but theoretically it can have a longer life. And that means, better repairability, better, like, you're not going to throw most of the laptop immediately into the garbage if you need an upgrade. Like, so theoretically it might be more environmentally friendly. I don't know. I think I like where it's moving. I hope this is a direction that more devices take, like more repairability, built for repairability, built for upgradability. Like, I like that.
100%. I think we can probably all align with that. Wasn't there a cell phone company that was doing this too? Did you buy one?
They never got it to market. I remember hearing about that, seeing some videos. I think it's a lot harder with cell phones. Size is pretty crucial with cell phones, and even things like, water and dust and stuff. Like if you have something that's modular, it's like going to be more of a problem. I'm very sure that the framework is like less, waterproof than a MacBook Pro, but like I'm not going to test that.
I spilled.
The listeners demand.
This is one of the dumbest things that I've ever done, and also one of the luckiest things that I've ever been a part of. Like, no joke, I knocked over a bottle of water and it spilled across 2 laptops and my cell phone. Just boom, like my entire life, right? And I was like, and it wasn't like 20 ounces of water like chugging on, glugging out on it, but it was still like there's water across both my computers and my phone. My phone I was less worried about, but like open laptops, and I was like, well, I'm done. I'm done with everything. But zero consequences for my action. Nice. So I continue marching forward, making no adjustments. But it was dramatic.
Well, Nate, what is making, apart from not having to replace 2 laptops and a cell phone, what is making you happy this week?
Well, I've been going back to New York City.
New York City? Hey, that's my city.
I've been trying to visit Laura and get myself a slice, but turns out Spidah-Mahn can't visit Laura Nash in New York City. But in between playing,
Nate was actually caught by Spider-Man when he tried to get into the city.
In between playing Slay the Princess, I have been picking up Spider-Man 2 for PlayStation 5, the Spider-Man for PS4, and then the Miles Morales DLC are 2 of my favorite things. I've said many times on this podcast that swinging is my favorite game mechanic, and nothing does it better.
And his favorite weekend activity. Am I right, folks?
Whoa,
Zing.
And so it's like the biggest game in the world right now. So I'm not breaking any news here, but Spider-Man 2, it's great.
Good video game.
Yeah, it's great. I love it. It's really, I think most of the games that I've played on PS5 have either been like indie games that we're doing for the show or like re-releases from the late stages of the PS4. And this, I think, is the first game that I've played that is like really, at least from my understanding, like truly developed the entire time for PS5. And you can tell, it's an action game. It's fast paced. And there's just some really cool things that they do. Besides the fact that there's zero loading across anything ever. There's like this really slick fast travel mechanic now that really clearly takes advantage of the engine. But there's a really fun fight where you're chasing someone and they have like a Doctor Strange style portal gun. And you are Spider-Man going at full Spider-Man speed, swinging and zipping around, and you're going through these portals and just like zip zapping around the entire world. And it really, like, for the first time with playing on the PS5, which I've had for a couple of years now, felt like, okay, this is playing like next generation video games, like high dollar, high expense, everything. Like, it's great. So I'm really, really enjoying it. No surprises. I will say, like, I think some of the writing is a little whatever. Like, the game really tries to be sweet a lot, which is surprising. I don't think like the last ones tried this as much. I feel like the writers played like Life is Strange, and they're like, how can we get that vibe into this game? There's a lot of like, there's like literally a moment where you're riding your bike through New York City. The game's telling you how great New York City is. It's hilarious. The game truly loves New York City. And like the Shins, the song, like the first big Shin song that's like in Garden State and all that, the one big song from the Shins from like 2005 or whatever.
New Slang. Yeah.
New Slang. Thank you. That's playing like gently in the background as you're riding your bike through New York City. And like, there's all these little things that sometimes it's really touching and really nice. And sometimes it's like, what am I even doing? And then finally, what has really stood out to me on this one is that Spider-Man these games are basically like AAA WarioWare. Like it is constantly just throwing mini games at you. The whole thing is just mini game after mini game. It's all about like every little mission has some new thing where you're going to have to like use your controller in a perfect little mechanic. You have to squeeze the right trigger and then squeeze the left trigger, and it's all the dynamic trigger stuff. So the triggers are resistant, and or you have to like solve this little micro puzzle, and it's just constant little quick time events, constant little puzzles, constant little mini games over and over and over. And it just made me think of WarioWare, which is fun, but also hilarious because you'll be like, I'm Spider-Man, and now I have to stop and do this like little tile matching puzzle. Just in the middle of the city, in the middle of fighting crime, I have to tile match. I don't know. It's great. It's a fun game. I'm enjoying it. I recommend it.
I'm looking forward to playing it when they port it to PC in 2 years.
Yeah. It's really fun. And the main Spider-Man story is great. I love a Spider-Man. Who doesn't love a Spider-Man?
I just need you to screen share so I can be like, okay, go left, go right, go left. Okay, is my house in the game?
Yeah,
it wasn't the last one, so
yeah, it sure seems like it.
That
like,
moved.
and it's bigger now. Like they've added another one of the boroughs. Like it's a really impressive game. So it's just fun to kind of see what is now possible with these sorts of consoles.
Well, Shane, what is making you happy this week? I'm going to have to recommend something that is kind of basic. I'm going to be a little basic right now.
Do it.
Because I really liked The Killer, which you can see on Netflix.
Ooh.
So I have always been a big fan of David Fincher and his movies. I think the first one that I watched back when I was a young man was Fight Club. And I no longer watch or really recommend Fight Club unless you saw it back in the day and had that experience. And
yeah, you kind of have to have a certain context for it. Otherwise, it's ooh. I still respect the movie in ways. I still might even say that I like it. But like,
I believe we watched that at a New Year's party, all three of us together.
We totally did.
And where was I?
I loved
St. Louis.
I loved Fight Club.
Not knowing you guys.
So
yeah, because we were teenagers.
Probably in middle school.
We were in middle school and in the other room while the adults were drinking champagne, we were watching Fight Club and thinking we were the cool ones.
I remember watching this in like middle school or early high school or whatever, and me and a buddy with the VHS we spent like a half an hour trying to pause the movie because we saw something pop up on screen and we were like, there's something going on in this. And we spent a half an hour trying to pause the VHS. And as soon as we finally nailed the pause, we deeply regretted nailing the pause because it is, if you remember the plot of the movie, male frontal nudity.
Where they edited in frames of porn into the movies and stuff. Yeah. So Fight Club is, I mean, it's not it's a field day for criticism today, but it is still a great movie, and it's by one of our greatest directors. And in the time since then, well, actually in the time before then, because I actually have gone back, and now most of his early movies, except for Alien 3, are fantastic. I love The Game. I love Seven is amazing. Panic Room. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. But some of my very favorite movies are his most recent ones. Like, I absolutely loved Gone Girl. I absolutely loved Mank, even though not maybe completely Mank is great. But The Killer is just thrilling. The Killer is it's a kind of a crime procedural, if I can kind of say it that way. It is a movie about a assassin who just sort of is going about his business, and something kind of goes awry, and I won't spoil it, but he has to kind of do a lot of cleaning up. And it stars Michael Fassbender, who is fantastic.
He's never not great.
Never not great on screen. Never not great on screen. And
you see that movie where he was a vampire?
Which one was that?
I forget the title. Look it up though. He's great in it. He's like a Nazi vampire.
Oh man. Okay, I got to check this out. Well, the plot of this movie is pretty straightforward. It reminds me of like movies from the 70s. Like it's just
Blood Creek, 2009 American supernatural horror thriller film directed by Joel Schumacher. Blood Creek, weird movie, worth checking out.
Yeah, sure. That's on my list now. I'll have to get that. Is that on Netflix? I don't know.
I don't know.
This one's on Netflix. And this is kind of a funny thing is the relationship now between Fincher and Netflix, because this movie went right to Netflix, and so did Mank, his last movie. And the flip side of that is like all of these high-end Netflix productions look like they are knockoffs of his visual style. They're like they're all like B-grade David Fincher cinematography. So I'm getting way off here. This is a good time to check out that movie. It just hit Netflix. They're advertising the hell out of it.
He's an assassin, right?
Yeah, it's. I think if I didn't say, yes. So the story is he is an assassin, and he is kind of, first off, you're just sort of getting a view into his world while he carefully stakes out a long range sniper hit, and the hit goes wrong, and he has to deal with the aftermath of that. That splashes back on him. He's kind of burned. He's kind of out in the cold, and you get to see a super competent hitman kind of run around the globe trying to clean up his mess, right? And that's the story, and it's great. And his outfits are great. The locations are great. The action scenes are great. Yeah, recommend it.
Cool. Sounds great.
I liked it more than Mank. I'll say that.
What, you're not into the story of the making of Citizen Kane?
I was super into that. I was super into it. Mank was great. But
this was more up your alley.
This
sounds like it's the name of a movie that's in immortality.
Yeah. Well, who doesn't want to watch a movie about an assassin? That's like classic, great. Always.
The movie's called The Killer. The main character is The Killer.
Yeah, there is a second Assassins movie called The Killer. Maybe it's The Killers. There's another one coming out this year that's got a comedy bent to it. There's a second Assassin movie with almost the same title.
Assassins, so hot right now.
You're thinking of The Killers from 1946.
Ernest Hemingway's The Killers, or the other one, or the Stanley Kubrick one.
Oh dear.
There's just or the John Woo one from the 80s.
Oh no, the one from 1964.
Yes. Turns out The Killers is not an original title.
No, you're thinking of Brandon Flowers and Mr. Brightside. From The Killers.
Yes, that's the one.
Mm-hmm. I just love a movie where the title can be formulated into the main actor
the killer.
Garfield.
Oh my God, the Garfield trailer.
The Garfield trailer. The Garfield trailer.
What have they done?
I don't know. It's okay. I'm a big Garfield fan, which is a weird thing to say, but I love Garfield.
Yeah, you are.
I'm willing to give it a shot. It seems okay.
I feel really bad for everyone who is a voice actor, because like they're like working on their craft and they're like Jonathan Simsing it up, and they're like, oh well, am I going to go in and what kind of take am I going to bring to this character? And then right behind you, walking into the audition room, is like Chris Pratt.
It's me,
I'm just going to do this in my voice.
I'm Chris Pratt Garfield. You love me.
He's not even doing a voice. He just walks in and he does the Chris Pratt voice for the cat.
Chris Pratt. I'm Chris Pratt Garfield.
I hate
Wait,
it.
can I do a cat sidebar, because I may have
yes to a cat sidebar.
Okay.
What?
So a couple of days I have started so I walk my son to school every day, and home most days. And we have started seeing this black cat crossing our path. A beautiful black cat. Big yellow eyes, one teeny tiny white spot the size of a dime on one shoulder blade. You can't even see it at a distance. How did I see it? Well, this cat was kind of wandered up to my back door when it was raining the other day, and my wife fed the cat, and it's my cat now, apparently.
Jane, you're playing a dangerous game. 1 year ago, I had one cat. And I now have tripled my cat inventory. We have 3 cats because of feeding very friendly strays.
Yes.
It is actually the 1 year anniversary of our of the day we snagged Marceline from the storm and brought her inside.
And the possum you feed stays outside.
I don't know if this is a boy cat or a girl cat. I can't tell, but we have fed the cat over the course of the entire last week. We have fed the cat a grand total of 2 times. And it spent we haven't fed it in like a couple of days. It spent the entire day today sitting at my back door meowing.
Well, it doesn't know. It is not aware of your your patterns, right? It just knows. The one time there were 2 times, in fact, there were tasty, easy.
That's how animals are, man. I walked my dog past a spot one time where he found a partially eaten chicken wing in a bush, and was able to get a bite of chicken wing. And for 3 years after that, we couldn't walk past that spot with him checking to make sure there wasn't more chicken in that bush.
My backyard is a damn menagerie. because Molly and me, I'm all in on it too. You just throw all of our leftovers just in the backyard. And I'm just in a city block.
Yeah.
And we've got raccoons and possums and cats and hawks and like everything.
Yeah, the reason I know about your menagerie is because I'm constantly seeing on Instagram, like, look at the animals eating food on my back porch. And I'm like, I live in New York. I'm like, get them out.
Yeah, it's wild. It's like, we're all going to get rabies.
Oh, yeah. I do want to
3
say,
cats now.
I do want to say the actual title of that movie, which is also going to be a Netflix release, is Hitman.
Hitman. Oh, is that from the game?
No, it's a Richard Linklater movie.
As distinct from The Killer. Totally
as opposed to it's the other assassin movie.
Yeah. All right, guys, we're going too long. We have to have some time for we promised a spoiler break. So let me do a quick outro. We're going to go to spoiler break. Listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. You can find our show on the internet at shortgame.fm, where you'll find links to all of the stuff. Most notably, our Patreon page. The Patreon is how you can support the show. And for just $3 a month, you can get instant access to an early access feed of our episodes and access to our Discord community, which is where we talk about the show, plan episodes. Great resource for that's where we get most of our suggestions. So we got a suggest a game channel in there, and even if we don't do it, there's lots of great suggestions of games that you might play from our community in there, which is a great resource. And we talk about all sorts of other stuff too. So join us there. Let's see. You can find me on the internet at Raygan, RAYGAN.me. And that's got links to all of my various stuff, including my Mastodon profile and other socials that I'm on. You can contact me there. Laura, where can people find you?
You can find me on Mastodon at Laura J. Nash at bird.rodeo.
And Nate, where can people find you?
At Nate STL on the various social media platforms.
And Shane, where can people find you?
On Mastodon at Shane at bird.rodeo, or on the various social platforms at 8-Bit Shane.
And here it is, your spoiler break. So, how about them freaks?
Bunch of weirdos.
Well, some of them are pretty freaky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Princesses.
So, I don't know how we want to go about this, but I thought maybe we talk about some of the different versions of the princess, because there are like, okay, let me see. I actually pulled up a guide here. There's a really good guide to all achievements on the Steam community page that does a pretty good job of sort of organizing and laying out what all of the different actual possible endings are, because there are some sort of general story achievements, and then there is an achievement for every single ending, and this gives you a little bit of like, okay, a 3-sentence description of how to get to that specific ending. And here's the different routes: the adversary route, the beast route, the damsel route, the nightmare route, the prisoner route, the razor route, the specter route, the stranger route, the tower route, and the witch route. And each of those represents a different version of the princess.
There's the wild, the thorn. Am I missing any?
Or are those
maybe those are duplicated? I'm not sure. But those are all that's listed here on the achievements guide.
Well, we didn't even mention in the main part of the episode, like we talked about the different versions of the princess, but we didn't even talk about the different versions of the hero that you carry along with you as you die or what have you. Like it like that felt too spoilery, but like it's a huge part of the game that we didn't even talk about. So like, to me, when I'm thinking about this like spoiler discussion, it's like, what were the best princesses, and then also like I just loved the different like the essence of your previous self that stuck with you as you
for me, I of course I think you're locked into seeing 4 of the different princesses, right?
I think so.
The progression through it for me was really fantastic. The ones that I saw were all great, but the one that I ended with I was super happy was the last one I hit, which was the Razor. Did anybody else get that one? Okay. It worked really well for me as like a conclusion, because do we want to talk about this kind of meta story here a little bit?
Now's good.
So the kind of truth of the situation, as you get into it, so it's kind of revealed to you slowly as you go through the paths. When you get to the end of one of these kind of 3-chapter runs, you've been told by the narrator, like, she's going to lie and cheat, and you can't really believe what she says, and you may or you may not, but then you get to the end and she has succeeded, or you've killed her, or whatever, and in pretty much every case, arms appear, kind of a bouquet of arms appear and kind of claw her into the void. And so the structure here is generally, in chapter 1, the cabin looks pretty normal. The basement looks pretty normal, and things aren't all that weird, right? In chapter 2, based on the experience you had with the princess in chapter 1, you might have died, she might have died, whatever might have happened there. You're coming back, but you have with you the voice of a previous version of yourself. And this is one of the many voices done by Jonathan Sims. And that version of you is influenced by the experience that you've had. So, if you have a version in which you're crushed mercilessly, you might have a voice that, feels like everything is for nothing. Or
broken. That was my first one. I got lit up by the princess on my first try. Like just crushed.
What happened?
I think that I tried to talk to her and then eventually decided like to try to kill her, but she just definitely, like, it wasn't even close, and she just like swatted the knife out of my hands and beat the shit out of me till I died. And then that was the broken was the next time that I came back. I had that guy with me. I did manage to kill her multiple times, which was fun, but yeah, the first time I just got my ass handed to me by this princess. It was great.
So it's kind of slowly revealed to you that the princess that you see and what her form is really influenced or created by what you see in her and the choices that you make. In the second chapter, that's kind of amplified, and in the third chapter, it's amplified further until in each of these runs you're seeing this way over the top, grotesque version of the princess, and not just the princess. Like, reality itself is warped and reshaped, and as you get through the rounds of this story, between the overall bigger loops, you are you see the princess pulled out of reality by this kind of mass of arms, and then you are in this space that it calls the Long Quiet. And in fact, and I don't know if I want to, I guess I'll just,
we're in spoiler territory,
roll right into it. The Long Quiet is in a way synonymous with you, the main character. All of the voices that you hear are you, with the exception of the narrator, who I wasn't able, you're not able to get the full picture because you can't get, there's a scenario where you can kind of interrogate the narrator a bit. But
you can only ask him like 5 questions.
Yeah. There's a lot of possible questions, but you can only choose a few. But the narrator has, and he identifies her as the shifting mound. So there's this kind of duality where maybe you were once one entity that got split in 2 or whatever, but ultimately the narrator character in reality is like a wizard or something who has created you to be a new god to destroy death, right? And so Meanwhile, in this kind of Nowheresville, for most of the in between the chapters, you're conversing with this entity that it's her, but represents kind of the true version of her, and she doesn't really know who she is. I found this part really compelling because she's kind of asking you to bring her different versions of herself so that she can learn about herself.
Which also gives you, it's a really clever mechanic where the story matches just like the gameplay. It tells you very quickly, like, oh, okay, so I have to go through and like make different choices to uncover different versions of the princess in order to like bring them to her, right? And like it sort of real. I thought that was such a smooth way of like justifying this loop and making you feel not just compelled because you want to learn about, you want to see all the game, but also compelled because now the mechanic is to like do the loops. And it also made me feel like more justified in doing the wacky selections, if that makes sense. Like I think my first run through, I'm like, okay, like I'm not just gonna kill this princess. I want to talk to her, and then like after I learn like, oh, actually she wants me to like, I'm like, all right, next one, I'm going in full on trying to kill her, no holds barred. Like I'm just gonna try to stab her without saying anything, or like now I'm gonna try to free her and see what you just like. It like narratively frees you to do whatever decision you want and feel like it's okay, even if it's horrible.
And you can ask that like alternate, the sort of like, I don't know, the shifting mound. You can ask her, so what version of you do you want me to bring next? And she's pretty much just like, whatever you want. And I like that. It is really a good narrative, even though I think that like some of the sort of metaphysical aspect of it didn't 100% land for me.
Sure.
The whole like, like duality of a, God thing. Like the stakes felt a little weird to me, but overall, I think it's a really good narrative grounding for getting you to try all the different stuff. And so in that, it really works well. And you have to bring, I just looked it up because we said 4 and I think it's actually 5. You have to bring her 5 versions of the princess.
Okay.
And then once you do, that kicks off the end game. And even then you have a number of different branching options. So, you can decide whether you want to like fight have combat with her, whether you want to like, apparently you can like both decide to restart the loops and, kind of continue the cycle in forever. You can reject your godhood and like walk away as humans or something. There's quite a lot of different options in terms of the ending. And some of that seems to be affected by which versions of her you bring to her. So I really like that it doesn't just end with, go through this and find 5 versions of the princess. It's, even that kind of does further branching.
The reason that I said the razor was a really fun one for the last kind of round for me was kind of, I had kind of got, you kind of understand the frame story at that point. And it's like, oh, well, this is really just kind of a game that I'm playing with this shifting mound, creature, goddess, whatever. And so I'm like, okay, so in that one, you're kind of playing around. You go down in the basement. I think you get this one by like you stab the princess, but then you're like, well, okay, hang on, let's not. And then she pulls out like a hidden knife of her own, and she like kills you. And then from there on, this is one of the longer ones. I think this is one of the ones that has like an extra chapter in it where it's like you go down in the basement. You're like, I'm not going to come over there because I know you have a knife. And she's like, no, I don't have a knife.
I love that. No, what are you talking about?
That one was so funny and like it's very bloody, but it was so funny and silly. And then it really, when it gets amped up to 11, like they all do, she's like got knives shooting out of her arms, and and it's like,
did you get the one where one hand you're stabbing yourself and with the other hand you're trying to pull the knife out to stab her with it? Because
no, it was
that's one that was where I got it's where all the wet sound stuff I was talking about, because you're just stabbing yourself in the chest, walking towards her, because one of the heroes that is still with you wants you to stop and wants you to like give in to her. So what the narrative is telling you is that hero is controlling your right hand and is stabbing you, and then another hero in your body is fighting that and trying to pull the knife out to stab her, and you end up getting in this thing where you're stabbing yourself and stabbing her back and forth, and it's horrible and awesome.
I really like, while we're talking about like gross, like this is one of the earlier ones that I got, but there's a moment where like if you come at her with a knife and then you try you try not to kill her, and then the narrator will like take over your body and tell you know, and then Stanley went and stabbed the princess, that kind of thing. But then you can resist that, and so you end up just standing there holding the knife, and the princess is like, we both know this isn't you, and she'll take the knife away and she'll say, I'll try to make it quick. And then she starts stabbing you, but she's terrible at it. So she has to just keep going. Sorry, stabbing you again and again and again. And that was pretty funny in and of itself. But then you loop back and I was like, why did you do that? And she said, I thought I was supposed to. It's like, God, it's so funny.
Yeah. That's
the one that.
Did anyone else get the Beast? That was one of my favorite ones.
I did not get the Beast.
No. Okay. So the Beast is you get down in. How do you get the Beast? So you get the Beast by not taking the knife, and then you go down and to tell her, you lie to her about saving her, but then you try to free her and then try and go back upstairs, I think, and then you end up fighting with her or something like that. But this is one of the ones where there's a few where this happens, where she like gnaws through her own arm to free herself.
Yeah, I got one of those, but I got the witch, and she did that.
And when you get back in chapter 2, she starts to look kind of creepy and cat-like, and has claws and teeth, and stalks you through the basement, which has sort of turned into a jungle. And that scene was fantastic. It had great animation, great art. You can't really see the princess. She's like off in the darkness. And then eventually when you do see her, she, well, for me, I think there's possible ways you can get out of this, but she saw me and then ate me alive in one bite. And talk about wet sounds. You're in her stomach being digested, and she's trying to get out of the basement. And the messed up thing is like this long ass conversation that you have with her from inside of her stomach. While talk about the creepy hand animation. Talk about the creepy hand animation while you're being dissolved in acid.
Oh God.
That one was intense and fantastic.
I thought the most intense one that I ran into was the Nightmare. Did you guys run into that one? That's the one with the creepy doll mask.
Creepy doll mask. Yes, I did get that one.
Yeah, I like that one a lot because so the premise with that one is that like I don't remember exactly what you do to bring that one about, but like I
got the list here. Hang on.
You have to keep her locked away, basically. Like you
don't take the blade. You talk to her and you decide to leave her locked up. Yeah.
Right. And then, that spins out into a bunch of different stuff. But like the premise there is that like she is a creature so scary that you just die. So she has this creepy doll mask on, and she'll come after you.
That's rough.
And depending on how you interact with her, like, she'll the basement is dark. It's a creepy thing full of like pillars and like darkness, and she'll just like come at you out of the dark in very creepy ways, and you just get scared to death. And then there's
pillars are scary.
Yeah, and at some point, one of your inner voices figures out that like it can keep you alive if it just manually tries to work all your organs to keep them from shutting down. So like she'll come up to you and start scaring you to death, and then one of the inner voices is just like, heart, liver, blood, brain, just like lists, just like repetitively listing in the background all of your different like body processes that it's trying to like keep alive while you're frozen in fear having a conversation with this like horrifying doll. It's great. It was a great horror
that
moment.
Was a great moment for the audio as well, because it had that repetition, those kind of like heart, liver, lungs, whatever. He was like repeating it, like chanting kind of in the background as the audio for the entire scene. And then like sometimes the other inner voices would like distract him and you would just die.
That's awesome, man. So I really like that one. There's a lot of really strong ones. There's one that's like the step
Such
on me
writing.
Mommy, like big giant woman kind of thing.
There's a couple of those.
Yeah, there's a couple. There's like the tower.
I mean, it's 2023. What do I got to do to get a giant woman in my game? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this game just gives it to you.
Mm-hmm. If you want, there is the like, you can work a romantic cutesy ending out of this if you really want one. And that's fine.
Yeah, everybody gets
still
one.
End up having to feed her to the machine at the end, right? But or the shifting mound at the end. So there's no happy endings in this game. But you can do that. I think that each one of these routes and its sub routes, they're all like pretty effective little horror stories. And every time I got through like 2 versions of one of these routes, I was like, I gotta see another one. I gotta see the third one. It really keeps bringing you back.
This is a very replayable game. I will probably play this at least one more time.
Yeah, I probably would too.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I've said before that I'm not a big horror fan, but for some reason, like I don't know if it's the setup, if it's the light humor with the narrator right out of the gates, or the potential humorous moments that you guys outlined, but there was something about this game that I never felt like horror while playing. Like
I was a little creeped out by the nightmare. I think the rest of it,
that one
I was definitely creeped out by some moments.
Yeah. But like it all felt like absurd and dark and weird and things like that. But I was more like, oh, cool, he's stabbing himself while trying to stab her. It's like just the intrigue of like, what is this going to lead to? Way overpowered any sense, for me personally, any sense of like, this is scary, Yeah. And I think that I think that's somewhat purposeful with like the whole rap story and it like perpetuating you trying out things and sort of incentivizing you to go for weird shit, but like for like we've done horror games before, I was like, I don't care about any of this like weird dark stuff, but in this game I'm like, give it to me. Oh yeah, she sawed her arm off tight. It's I don't know, but it's really successful in what they're going for.
And it's like the comedy does work. It never felt corny to me at all.
Yeah.
It's great writing. It's just like really good writing throughout.
It really is.
Yeah.
And of course, great voice acting and art.
Yeah. I mean, everything,
all works well together.
As far as like visual novels go, if you still want to put this in this camp, it's like this feels like a game changer. You know what I mean? Like we've never played anything that calls itself a visual novel or is in that camp that is like this, like over the top, and the mechanics are so smooth and I don't know. It really stands out to me. I feel like this is going to be a game that we're going to talk about for a long time.
I think so too.
Which endings did you guys get?
I wish I
tell
had
you mine.
Like list in front of me. Tell me what you got.
There are 3 main endings as far as I understand it. I'm wikiing it anyway. But the ending that I got was, I had come to really like like multi-armed creepy lady. So, you know, after getting some of the explanations from the narrator / good / evil wizard, I was like, okay, you know, I've already destroyed the world like a bunch of times already. What's one more? So I decided to do the ending where you kind of fully become the long quiet, and the shifting mound and the long quiet crack open reality and step out into infinity to be together forever, free from having this boring old universe weighing them down. So
Cabin in the Woods ending. Just burn it all down, and
it was a very satisfying ending. I liked it very much. Which endings did you guys get? Did you so the other two possibilities are either to decide to kill the princess again, slay the shifting mound, whatever, or you can well, actually, I don't really understand what the other third option represents here.
I had read that there was a third option where you can reject your godhood and walk away as humans. I have not played that ending, and I don't know exactly what's required to get it. I got the same ending you did, Shane. I think that was sort of like, it seemed like the natural one to me, but
yeah.
Which ending is the good ending? I'm not sure. Is it the one where I kill everyone?
Yeah. I think so.
It felt good to me.
Yeah.
Well, I felt like, you know, anything where I got to say "fuck you" to the narrator was like really my my choice. High recommendation on this one. I'm out of things to say about it, but I think folks should definitely check.
One of our longer episodes in quite a while.
It really is.
Yeah.
So once again, you can find this game on Steam. It's $17.99 at its MSRP, and I would strongly recommend folks check it out. And thanks for listening to this extra long episode of The Short Game.